Okay, so let's get right to it. So we're on the Chav Zayin Amud Bet. We got up to the Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah in on the page. So again, we're still dealing with the laws of Behemot, the things to do with animals and Yom Tov. Let's see. So the Mishnah says as follows. We have quite a number of Mishnayot that we're going to get through now in relatively quick succession. Behema shemeta. Lo yazizenu mimkoma. An animal that dies, you cannot move it from its place. Why can you not move it? Because the animal has died, is now muktzeh, right? There's nothing that you can do with it. If exactly what animal we're dealing with, we're going to discuss in the Gemara. But essentially, right, we know that an animal, our Masechet began the whole discussion with an egg and a chicken and animals which are generally going to be muktzeh on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, an animal may not be muktzeh because you can shecht it and you can eat it, etc. But here the case was you didn't shech the animal just died. So obviously you can't eat it, it's not a kosher shchita, and therefore it's going to be muktzah. Umase v'shalu et Rabbi Tarfon alea v'al hachala shenitmet. So the case was, it happened, I guess there was an animal that died, they asked Rabbi Tarfon, they asked him about the animal, and they also asked about chala shenitmet, chala which became tameh. What is the connection between the animal specifically and the chala? So we're going to see. But chala again, chala is not. We keep saying chala in the Gemara and the Mishnah is not the chala that we call chala today, right? But it's a certain part of the dough that's separated, that's given over to the kohen. It has to be eaten in tahara. If the chala becomes tameh, it's like kodshen that you can't eat it. So also there's a question really, what can you do with it? So this is the case. Maseh. ושאלו את רבי טרפון עליה ועל החלה שנטמאת, ונכנס לבית המדרש ושאל. Okay, so he walked into the Beit Midrash and he asked Chachamim, what is the din? Very interesting. Why could Rabbi Tarfon not give the answer himself? Why did he go into the Beit Midrash to ask? Maybe out of humility. Maybe it was a complicated question. Okay, whatever it is. אמרו לו, לא יזיזם ממקומם. They said, no, you cannot move them. You cannot move them. Neither the animal nor the chala, which has become tamei. So why are both of these going to be muktzah? So have a look at Rashi. It's quite a long Rashi here in the Mishnah. Rashi says, chala shenitmet einat roya lekohen hayom. Okay, so once the chala becomes tamei, so it's now not fitting for the kohen today. The kohen is not going to be allowed to eat it. The abachila asura leolam. For eating, it's now forbidden forever. It's tamei. Nobody can eat it. Uvasaka. So what about to burn it? What about to burn it and use it as fuel, use it as lights or whatever? Basaka or letitala kalbo. Right? If it was Yom Chol, so what do you do with chala, which is tamei? So the kohen, he can burn it, he can get benefit from it as fuel, or he can give it to his animals, or letitala kalbo. But both of these things, but Yom Tov asur, on Yom Tov that's going to be forbidden. Why is that going to be forbidden on Yom Tov? We don't burn kodshim, which has become tamei, on Yom Tov. Obviously, kodshim tehorim we wouldn't burn because you would use them, but kodshim tameim we won't. We don't burn on Yom Tov. Now the question is why? Afilu alidei achilat behema, and that meaning you don't. The word meva'arin can mean to burn, right? But really, meva'arin means to destroy, to get rid of it. So we don't consume it from the world. So neither by burning nor by giving it to the animal to eat. Dekai malan, because we have a principle. She'en sofin kodshim b'yom tov. We don't burn kodshim on Yom Tov. Why is that? So you might have said, the reason why we can't burn is because, remember, havara is a melacha. Now it's true that on Yom Tov we allow havara, we allow you to light candles and to light fire, right? But that is where there is a need, where it's l'tzorach Yom Tov. So if it's not l'tzorach Yom Tov, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. So he says, first of all, that's not actually the reason why over here. Says Rashi, he says, lo tema. V'lo tema dafka sreifa, mishum davara shelo l'tzorach. Yeah, so you might have thought that if the whole reason is because I can't burn it, okay, so I can't burn it, So I can't burn it on Yom Tov because that's Havara Shelo L'Tzorach. But I could give it to the animals to eat. So he says, no, that's not the case. Right, you don't say that it's only Shrefa that's not allowed because it's Havara, which is not for a Yom Tov need. Deha'en madlikin b'shemen Shrefa b'Yom Tov. Havara l'tzorechi. Right, everybody remembers this Mishnah because in B'mei Madlikin, right, what we say, Ein madlikin shemen Shrefa b'Yom Tov. We don't light or we don't burn shemen shreifa. What is shemen shreifa? Shemen shreifa is shemen is oil that has to be burnt. It has to be burnt because it was of kodshim, was of truma or whatever, and it became tamei on Yom Tov. So therefore, the only thing you can do that is burn it. So you don't burn that on Yom Tov, even though the aimadikim b'shem shreifa b'Yom Tov havara letzollechi dadlakata na b'Yom Tov tzorach achilai. Umuteret. Right? Even though, so this is the proof that this has not got to do with the malacha of Yom Tov, right? Because Shemen Shreifat, because to burn it on Yom Tov you're allowed to light candles if you need a candle in the room where you are eating and you can't see, so you need to light the Yom Tov candle. The truth is, we do this all the time. When you have, if let's say Yom Tov comes out on Motzei Shabbat, right? So you can't light the candles on, and strictly speaking, you could do it on any Yom Tov. But you can't light candles on Shabbat. You're allowed to light candles on Yom Tov. When do we light candles? The Yom Tov candles on Yom Tov, which is on Motzei Shabbat. We wait till Shabbat is out, and then when it's already Yom Tov, that's when we light. Okay, we light from an existing flame because midrabanan we say that we can't light a new flame. Okay, but why are you allowed to do that? You're allowed to do that because that's sorach achila. It's considered ochel nefesh. We're meant to light the candles in the place where we're eating, or at least we can get some benefit from the light when we eat. So therefore, that is our So if you have your shemen shreifa, okay, you have your oil, which was of truma, but it's become tamei, so you're allowed to burn it. So in theory, you could have said that you can light that oil, you can light that fuel to have your light, to have your candles for your Shabbos meal or your Yom Tov meal, and that is that's l'tzorach Yom Tov, which would be mutar. Okay, so we don't say that. Meaning that we say, but we still say you can't light the Shemen Shreifah Yom Tov, must be for another reason. So that's what Rashi explains over here. He says, therefore, Lo Teima Davka Shreifah Mishum Davar Shelo Tzorechi, Da'en Madlikim Shemen Shreifah B'Yom Tov, Havara Tzorechi. That which we say in the Mishnah, B'Mei Madlikin, we say it every Friday night. If you're quick enough and you manage to get there before the Chazan's finished. Right? So he says, Ein Madlikim Shemen Shreifah B'Yom Tov, that is Havara Tzorech. Because generally speaking, lighting candles on Yom Tov is a need, and that's allowed. Nonetheless, when it comes to Shemen Sreifa, we say no. V'shemen truma shenitmet. What is Shemen Sreifa? That is Shemen of truma, which has become tameh. D'gzerat hagatov she'en kochim tmei mitparlim b'Yom Tov. So now we learn something else. We have a gzerat hakatov. We have a gzerat hakatov that kodshim, which became tamei, we are not allowed to dispose them. We're not allowed to consume them on Yom Tov. Because the Torah gave importance to their burning. It became a significant action. It's like a melacha. Dichtiv ba'esh yisaref. The pasuk says that if I have kodshim, I have truma, whatever, which become tamei, I have to burn it. The pasuk says ba'esh yisaref. So burning it, it's like a mitzvah that's got significance, and therefore that act may not be the gzerat hakatov is that may not be done on Yom Tov. That is a significant melacha that may not be done on Yom Tov, and therefore, what essentially we're saying is that once we've learned that you're not allowed to not only just burn, but you're not allowed to dispose of or get rid of the truma, which is tamei on Yom Tov. So therefore, if you have truma or chala or whatever which is tamei on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to burn it. You're not allowed to give it to your animals. You're not allowed to do anything with it, and ultimately, therefore, it remains muktzeh. So that's the conclusion of our Mishnah, that both an animal which died on Yom Tov and chala, it could be truma, which becomes tamei, that both of those are going to be muktzeh. You're not allowed to move them on Yom Tov. Just while we're talking about lighting candles, so again, going back to the idea of lighting candles on Yom Tov, so we have a fascinating discussion, which is, if I have, what about what's considered a need? What's considered a Yom Tov need? So in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah talks about lighting candles in the Beit Knesset, for example. Okay, nowadays we don't. Where's the Yerushalmi? Nowadays we don't really light candles in the Beit Knesset. It's also a problem of it's a fire hazard, right? Thankfully we have electric lights, so we don't have to worry about that. In fact, the Mishnah Berurah right at the beginning of Orach Chaim, in the very first siman, when the Shulchan, when the Ramah tells us, put it up on the screen. Just 1 second. I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but why not? So very first halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Right, of Dinei Ashkamat HaBoker. Shulchan Aruch says, Yitkaber ka'ari la'amod b'boker la'avodat boro. The first thing is you have to wake up. You have to wake up properly. So wake up like a lion. Everybody asks. You've seen a lion in the zoo, right? They sleep all day. But anyway, a lion with strength has to wake up for the service of Hashem. Shehei humor hashacha. Okay, and at one point of here, so the Ramah tells us, he says like this. Right, don't, even if you're not going to wake up at dawn, which I'm sure you all do, but nonetheless, make sure you wake up in time for Zman Tefillah. And then he says, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. This pasuk from Tehillim. הוא כלל גדול בתורה, מעלות הצדיקים אשר הולכים לפני האלוקים. אין ישיבת האדם ותנועותיו ועסקיו הוא לבדו בביתו, כשיבתו ותנועותיו ועסקיו הוא לפני מלך גדול, etc. Right, very, very interesting. The Ramah chooses to start off the Shulchan Aruch with Musar, but he says we have this pasuk of Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. Right, I've placed Hashem before me always, and that is a fundamental principle of Torah and of the Ma'alot Tzadikim, as he writes. And why? Because a person has to realize it's not the way that I sit and the way that I move and the way I conduct my business, the way I conduct my speech, etc. When I'm by myself is one thing. When I'm in front of a great king, so then I would act a little bit differently. So I have to remember I'm always in the presence of the king. But why am I mentioning all of this now? Because the Mishnah Berurah writes, I believe, he says this, they used to have, in order to remember this, they would have these, sometimes you still see it on the walls, they would have these parchments with the drawing and especially the pasuk of Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, and right, he talks about it. I don't remember exactly where he says. Yeah, he talks about that over here, but somewhere where he says, then he says sometimes I would have candles in the shul. He says you have to be very, very careful. You have to be careful that you don't have these candles too close to the parchment, and chas v'chalila, you don't want it to burn, and Hashem's name would be erased, etc. So that's in terms of candles. So we don't have to worry about that so much today. But the question is, if you already have lights in the shul, and if you light more candles, those just say it's kavod for the Beit Knesset. Are you allowed to light those candles on Yom Tov? Another question that comes up, and it's based on that, is if you have a Yotzat candle, are you allowed to light a Yotzat candle on Yom Tov? In Chutz La'aretz this comes up as well very often because you have 2 days Yom Tov, right? And it's the last day on which you say Yizkor and people want to light the candles. So generally speaking, you should light the candles before Yom Tov. That's better. But the poskim do discuss what if somebody didn't? Is it considered a tzorach Yom Tov to light it on Yom Tov or not? Okay, but either way, what we've seen is that the Shemen Shreifah, Rav Kochim, so it's not necessarily connected to the fact that even if it was for a Sorech Yom Tov, nonetheless there's a Gzerat HaKatuv not to light those candles. Okay, so now the Gemara comes along and says like this: says Leimat Nan Stama Delo Rabbi Shimon. Our first question is: we know that throughout Masechet Beitza, throughout Masechet Shabbos, throughout the laws of Muktzah, we have a famous machloket, right, between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. We've just been dealing with a different machlok, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. But Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda regarding muktzah. And what we generally say is Rabbi Shimon late le muktzah and Rabbi Yehuda it le muktzah. We say Rabbi Shimon does not have muktzah and Rabbi Yehuda does have muktzah. It doesn't mean that Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold by the principle of muktzah at all. But as we've discussed a number of times, it means that how far do we take muktzah? When do we say something is muktzah? When do we say it's not muktzah? How stringent do we have to be? So Rabbi Shimon is far more lenient. And again, to what extent do we say that something has been designated for use or not been designated for use? in one's mind. So many cases where Rabbi Yehuda will say this is muktzah, Rabbi Shimon will say this is not muktzah. So the question is, yeah, when we say the animal is muktzah, so the Gemara assumes, okay, this Mishnah is not like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, and we're going to actually see in the Mishnah and Shabbos, a Mishnah which we've seen before, because we quoted it on the very first daf of the Masechet, Mishnah or Braita, that the following. So there's leimat nan stama delok Rabbi Shimon. Let's say, shall we assume that our Mishnah which said that the behemah that died is a muktzah, that is not like Rabbi Shimon. Why? The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says as follows. Well, we saw this right at the beginning of the Masechet, as I said. Mechatchin et adluin, it's a Mishnah Masechet Shabbat, mechatchin et adluin lifnei הבהמה ואת הנבלה לפני הכלבים. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, אם לא הייתה נבלה מערב שבת, אסורה. So what's the case? Rabbi Shimon says you can cut up mechatchin et adluin, the gourds, these bigger vegetables, lifnei הבהמה, for an animal, you cut them up for an animal to eat. ואת הנבלה לפני הכלבים. When you have a carcass, you have a nevela, you can cut it up for the dogs to eat. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, אם לא הייתה נבלה מערב שבת, אסור, or אסורה. So Rabbi Yehuda says no. He says if you didn't have a nevela before Shabbat, i.e. the animal's still alive, so then it's going to be muktzah. So the implication is, if Rabbi Yehuda says that im lo hayta nevela me'erev Shabbat asura, if that's what he's saying, and he's arguing with Rabbi Shimon, then the implication is that Rabbi Shimon would say that even if it was not a nevela from erev Shabbat. In other words, Rabbi Shimon is saying that if the animal died on Shabbat or Yom Tov, right now it's not muktzah. And our Mishnah says that the animal that died on Yom Tov is muktzah. Okay, so therefore, our Mishnah does not fit exactly with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Just see Rashi. Rashi says, explains what we just said. Meaning it died on Shabbat. Kama, that's the case it's talking about. Since Rabbi Yehuda disputes this case, and he says, okay. So now says the Gemara, well, hang on a second. Rabbi Shimon. So not so fast. That's not necessarily the case. Maybe even Rabbi Shimon will agree in this case that our behemah is muktzah. Why? Rabbi Shimon bebaalei chayim shemetu shasulin. Okay, so we could say there's one key word that's missing over here that it doesn't that the Gemara doesn't actually say explicitly, but that's the whole meaning. Have a look at Rashi. Rashi said bebaalei chayim behemah bria ben hashmashot shemetu b'yom tov. Okay, maybe Rabbi Shimon agrees over here. Maybe when Rabbi Shimon said a nevela, he's talking about a case of an animal that is sick, an animal that you expect that it might die, and therefore it's not going to be muktzah when it becomes a nevela. In other words, over there, if I have a behemah sukenet, so Rabbi Yehuda will say, look, right now you're coming into Shabbat, you're coming into Ben Hashmashot, the animal is still alive, therefore it's muktzah midati. I don't have in mind that it's going to be a nevela on Shabbat. Why? Because when Shabbat comes in, it's not a nevela. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's a behemah. You expect it at some point over Shabbos it's going to die, beseder. Therefore, already from the onset of Shabbos, it's not muktzah in your mind because of when it's going to be a nevela. So that's where you expect that it's going to happen. But if it's just an ordinary animal, it's a behemah bria, I have no reason to suspect that it's going to turn into a nevela on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. Therefore, it's still going to be muktzah according to Rabbi Shimon. Right, so that's like what says, Afilu Taim Rabbi Shimon Modeh. Right. Afilu Taim Rabbi Shimon Modeh Rabbi Shimon b'Baalei Chaim shemetu she'asurin. Even Rabbi Shimon would agree that Baalei Chaim, briim, that healthy animals which suddenly die on Shabbat or on Yom Tov are going to be still muktzah. So now says the Gemara, okay, so we have a machloket amoraim, how to understand Rabbi Shimon. And based on this machloket amoraim, it's going to depend whether the terutz that we just gave is satisfactory or not. Hanicha lemar barameimar mishmei derava. De'amar modeh hayal Rabbi Shimon b'alei chaim shemetu shasurin shapir. So according to this opinion, it works. According to the opinion, again, we're now dealing with the machloket amoraim as to what we're talking about the machloket amoraim as to what the opinion of Rabbi Shimon is. So say hanicha lemar barameimar mishmei derava. Uh, According to Mar Bar Meimar, who said in the name of Rava, who said that Modeh Haya Rabbi Shimon Balei Chaim Shemet Jerusalem, who said he holds that according to Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon agrees that Balei Chaim, that healthy animals that die are still going to be asurim, are still going to be muktzah. So then that makes sense. Shapir, that's exactly how we just explained. Ela lamar Breder Rav Yosef Mishmei de Rava. The Amar, notice, there's a machloket as to how Rava understood Rabbi Shimon. Right? We had Mar Bar Meimar in the name of Rava, and now we have Mar Breder of Yosef in the name of Rava, who says, the Amar Chaluk היה Rabbi Shimon אפילו בבעלי חיים שמתו שמותרים. He says, no, he says, even Rabbi Shimon did disagree on this, even a healthy animal. He said, if it becomes a nevela on Yom Tov, so it's better, so it's not going to be muktzah. So then, how would we explain, if that's the case, then Rabbi Shimon's view does contradict our Mishnah. So what can you say? So Tirgum Ze'iri be'bemat kodshim. Okay, so a different answer. So Zairi says no. The case here is not that we're dealing with that we're not dealing with just an ordinary animal. We're dealing with an animal that was of kodshim, an animal that was designated to be a korban, and that's the animal that died, and that's the animal that's going to be muktzah, and that would be according to everybody seemingly. Now, daikanami, I'll bring you a diuk. I will bring you an inference from the Mishnah to prove that we're dealing with a behemat kodshim. How do I know that? Diktanya ale v'alachala shenitmet. Our Mishnah spoke about two different cases. It spoke about the case of a behemah that died, and it spoke about chala that became tameh. What's the connection? What's the kesher between an animal that dies and chala? So he says, ma chala dikdisha, af behemah dikdisha. Okay, so therefore it says like this, that just as chala has got the status of kodshim, so too the animal's got the status of kodshim. But now we say the following. We say, El adama de gedisha adchulin shalia. If you say, so if you say that our Mishnah is talking about a case of a bema of kodshim, so that means now we make a different difference. The bema of kodshim, you would not be allowed to move because that would be muktzah. But if it was an ordinary animal, so then it would then what? Then it would not be muktzah. Then you'd be allowed to move it. So now the Mishnah is only going to work according to Rabbi Shimon, but only going to work according to one opinion of Rabbi Shimon, right? So he said like this: if we now say that, right, we started off saying that our Mishnah that says muktzah that contradicts Rabbi Shimon by Masechet Shabbat, who says that an avela is not muktzah. So then we said no. So we don't necessarily have to say the Mishnah goes against Rabbi Shimon. We can say the Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, but we're talking about a healthy animal. If we're talking about a healthy animal, there are opinions that Rabbi Shimon would call it muktzah. The opinions that Rabbi Shimon would not call it muktzah. So we say no, we're not talking about a healthy animal necessarily. We're talking about an animal of kodshim. So we're talking about an animal of kodshim. That's the reason you can't move it. The inference is if it's an animal that's not of kodshim, it's an animal of chulin, then you can move it. So now we have a problem. So we say like this: Tama the kedisha the chulin shalia. If you say that it's a problem, if it's of kodesh, so it's of chulin, it's mutar. So ani chalama breder Rav Yosef mishmei de Rava. Taman chaluk hayal Rabbi Shimon af baalei chaim shemetu shemutalin. Shavir. That makes sense if we go according to that opinion in the Amoraim, the opinion of Ma breder Rav Yosef, who said in the name of Rava, who said that Rabbi Shimon would maintains that also by healthy animals that if they die, then they are mutar. They're still not muktzeh as an avela. So then we say shapil. That's fine. El alamal ba'ameima mishmei de Rava. Da'amar modeh ya Rabbi Shimon ba'balei chaim shemetu shasurim. If we take the other opinion, right, the opinion of Mar Bar Meimar, the name of Rava, that Rabbi Shimon agrees that when it comes to Be'ema, that is not Mesuken, when it comes to a healthy animal, Rabbi Shimon agrees that would be Muktzeh. So then, according to the explanation that we've just given in our Mishnah, that contradicts that. So we say, Mai Ika Meimar. Right, so how do we resolve that? So you have to say, actually, our Mishnah is talking about a behema mesukenet. It's talking about an animal that was right going to die, and you knew that before, and therefore and therefore it works according to everybody. So have a look at Rashi over here. The last Rashi on the Gemara, second wide line, says Hacha b'mayaskinan b'mesukenet leolam Rabbi Shimoni. So really we go back, we say yes, this is like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Just explain, because before that, because if we went like that opinion in the Amoraim that said that Rabbi Shimon holds like the same as Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to a healthy animal, the Rashi voice the Elamar Brei Damei says Mani lo Rabbi Yehuda but Rabbi Shimon, right? That's the point. The point, what's the difficulty? Because we could have just gone back and said our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, but we say no. Once we establish that our Mishnah is talking about a beima of chulin, so then we said that our Mishnah is talking specifically about a beima of chulin. Our Mishnah is talking about a beima of kodshim. That's how the Eri explained. So right, and the diuk was that since the Mishnah talks about kodshim, it talks about chala, and talks about the beima, and both of them are talking about kodshim. So then our implication was, if we have a beima of chulin, it would not be muktzah. So who's the one who says that a beima of chulin can't be muktzah? It won't be muktzah when it becomes a nevela and yom tov. It's definitely not Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says any nevela is going to be muktzah, right? And it's Rabbi Shimon according to one interpretation of Rabbi Shimon. But according to the second interpretation, where Rabbi Shimon says no, so now we have a problem, because now it emerges, that's what Rashi is telling me, that our Mishnah doesn't follow anybody. So you say, no, we have to say, that's what the Maik Alamei is. Who does the Mishnah follow in that case? So we say, we say, no, we're talking about a Be'emah Mesuken, and then it's everybody. So that's what Rashi is explaining here. He says, L'olam Rabbi Shimoni. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Shimon. Umadnitin b'mesukenet, the Shali Rabbi Shimon ba, okay? And our Mishnah, we're just talking about the other Mishnah, right, where we said that it's an avela, that Rabbi Shimon allows you to cut it up. Hilkach tama de kodshim lo yizizena ha de cholin shalia. In other words, we started off saying that our Mishnah can't be like Rabbi Shimon, and we end up saying that no, our Mishnah is like Rabbi Shimon. How so? So if it's like Rabbi Shimon, why do we say it's muktzah? We say it's muktzah because it's an animal of because it is kodshim. But if it was chulin, but it's a be'ema mesukenet, so then Rabbi Shimon would say that it's not going to be muktzah. Okay. One thing we didn't really explain is that why do we say that it's be'ema if it's kodshim, that it's going to be muktzah, even according to Rabbi Shimon? Because the reason an avela would not be muktzah is because you can feed it to the animals, etc. But that's what we started off. We said if it's of kodshim, you can't go and you can't feed it to the animals. That was the whole explanation of Rashi in the Mishnah regarding chala as well. Okay, so Ad Khan, we'll pick up next week from the next Mishnah, Bezrat Hashem. Have a good day, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks,